as he usually is.
Brown drives, layup off the glass.
That's not the first time we've seen a superstar in green and white sacrifice the body.
Garnett knocked away.
What is up? Welcome back to another episode of First to the Floor. We're continuing our Eastern Conference Rivals series with the Brooklyn Nets, kicking off with a very special guest, Billy Reinardt. Billy, how are you, mate?
I'm great, Jake. Thanks for having me.
Mate, pleasure. Thank you for coming on to talk some Celtics, some Nets. Ben, of course, in the take chair. Letting Jake do some hosting today. How you going?
I'm very happy to be out of the host seat for a change. Very happy to talk some Nets Celtics. I do think we'll find some alignment on our Kyrie Irving takes and our Ben Simmons takes. So very excited to get into it.
Yes, and you will have noticed, Billy, it's not by design. This has been the intro for a long time, but that first frame, those first shots of Kevin Garnett in a Nets uniform, not by design, but it does work very nicely today. So Mikal Bridges, kind of a bit of a star in FIBA so far. Have you been able to catch much of FIBA, the Nets? I know it's on some funky times for you guys.
Yeah, these games are pretty early in the morning. The games I haven't watched live, I've definitely tried to watch back, at least highlight clips, especially Mikal Bridges. Last game was definitely his best game, leading Team USA, having a nice scoring outburst there. But he's been a good player all along, being a lead defender for the Team USA squad. And he just fits well. He knows that role from Phoenix. He can play off the ball. He can play with other stars. With the Nets, you saw him obviously take an uptick in his scoring role, but he fits right in there in Team USA, as you've seen other stars like Brandon Ingram not used to that secondary role. So he's kind of a player that fits quite well in a FIBA Team USA standpoint. Yeah,
well, I guess he's used to it, right? So he's played the second fiddle in Phoenix and now kind of being the one guy. So he's definitely a guy that can be malleable depending on the role. He'd get a little in trouble though. His 3-point celebration got teed up for it. These FIBA refs don't play around with that stuff.
Yeah, these FIBA officials seem a little more old school than the NBA officials. Yeah. Mikal Bridges likes to have some fun with this 3-point celebration. The officials didn't seem to like it, but he'll learn. They got the semifinal game coming up, and I'm sure he'll be a little more cautious with the celebration going forward.
100%. I love it. Just basketball purity, none of that celebration stuff. We saw Luka get ejected in horrific fashion last night, Aussie time, in that game as well, which is great. What's the anxiety level? You know, I know you're a reporter first and maybe a fan second or third, but I remember watching like Jason Tatum in FIBA a few years ago, and he ended up spraining his ankle, and it's just not enjoyable as a fan who prioritizes the NBA season and wanting Jason Tatum to be healthy for that season. It's great watching Mikal Bridges succeed in this capacity, but is there any sense of anxiety there watching him, but exert himself outside of the NBA sphere?
Not really, because I think players in the off seasons, they're playing pickup, they're going through workouts. Like they're playing 5-on-5, so you can really get injured anytime. It's kind of good to see him competing at the highest level, being in condition and all that. So injuries happen. They're obviously unfortunate, but in my mind, you can't really prevent them too much. So, and Mikal Bridges has been one of the most durable guys, if not the most durable guy in the NBA over recent years. He has a consecutive game streak that might approach 400 this season. So if anyone's going to stay healthy, my money's on him. I don't want to jinx him, but it seems to be it was a good bill of health.
Yeah, didn't he? I think he played 83 games last regular season, didn't he?
Yes, after the trade, he got an extra one with the Nets. So
yeah. So currently holds the record for most games played in a season, which very impressive. Yes, we have our own Iron Man and Jason Tatum, so it's very nice to have a star like that. Speaking of having a star like that, is it kind of nice to have a nice, wholesome star, low drama centerpiece that we can just talk about basketball with as someone who's covering the Nets?
You were just saying it. We have a nice star in Jason Tatum, doesn't miss games. Mikal Bridges. Nets fans don't know a lot about that in recent years. With AD and Kyrie and Harden even missing sometimes, and Ben Simmons, of course. So it's nice to have someone that plays night in and night out. But if you ask me, and I think if you ask most Nets fans, they'll take the high risk, high reward maneuver and be in that championship conversation. There's nothing like that. So a little bit of a step back here for the foreseeable future for the Nets, but hopefully they can get back in contention at some point soon.
All right. Well, in an attempt to sort of bring us together as Nets and Celtics people, can we bond for a moment over our shared experience with the Kyrie Irving era that each of our respective teams experienced, coming to an end more recently there with the Nets, and the resulting rainbow, the springing flowers, the birds are chirping, etc. Like we sort of talked about it with Mikal Bridges, things are more wholesome now. Can you talk about like your experience of maybe covering that Kyrie Irving era in Brooklyn and just the experience of seeing it come to an end and the resulting relief?
The Kyrie Irving experience, and I don't even want to shrink it necessarily to Kyrie Irving because you guys with Boston dealt with Kyrie Irving as a solo kind of act. With the Nets, there was so much going on. I mean, you had AD, you had James Harden, and perhaps the biggest thing of all that a lot of people gloss over when talking about why this Nets experiment did not work, the pandemic. I mean, nobody could have predicted a once-in-a-generation pandemic like this. And obviously what would come from it with the Nets. And that kind of, in my opinion, that's what kind of threw them off with Kyrie not choosing to get vaccinated, not being available for games, domino effect with James Harden thereafter. So that's to me where the wheels kind of came off of this experiment. But from year one, Kyrie played only 20 games. He had a shoulder injury. That was before Kevin Durant had played a game. He missed the bubble. He was still recovering from his injury. When James Harden came that year, everything seemed great. That the three of them barely got on the floor together when the playoffs came on. You guys saw it with Boston. The Nets looked tremendous. I mean, obviously Jaylen Brown didn't play. I mean, Udoka wasn't there yet. He was still with the Nets at that point, and the roster of the Celtics had a ton of turnover for the next year. But the Nets were dominating with those three, and it looked like that in the early portion of the Bucks series. In my opinion, if even one of the two stars was healthy next to Durant, they would have won it all. They went to Game 7 of overtime with Kyrie and Harden barely able to play. So I think the team had a margin of error that year where they really could have won. So it's unfortunate to see how it happened, but the Kyrie drama never stopped. Obviously, as I mentioned, with the vaccination status. And then even this past season, the team was 18-2 across a 20-game stretch, one game behind the Celtics for the best record in the Eastern Conference. They were supposed to play just that week. Kevin Durant then got hurt. And then from there, the wheels kind of came off. Kyrie kept the team going around 500 for a little bit of time. And then just out of nowhere, a contract situation forced him to ask out. So it's unfortunate that Nets fans never got to see how last season would have ended up. I'm not sure they would have won. I'm not sure they would have gotten to the conference finals. But I think the team had proven at that point, especially after the early struggles with Steve Nash, that they could have been a factor in the Eastern Conference. So it's unfortunate that didn't get to play out. But yeah, the Kyrie experience is up and down, as I'm sure you guys are well aware.
Yeah. So, I mean, the Celtics fans are so lucky in the sense that we got to be the guinea pigs for the one time that the super team Nets got together in the playoffs. Like, that was the one series that KD, Harden, and Kyrie really got together. And unfortunately for the Celtics, it coincided with one of our worst rosters we've had, or the worst roster we've had in the Tatum era, and also with Jaylen Brown missing the only playoff run of his career. But thankfully, we did get one for the archives, that Jason Tatum 50-point game in Game 3. But I'm with you, and we've been definitely very. It does kind of coincide with how we feel about the Bucks and the run that they had. But people forget, like Mike Budenholzer, people wanted to fire him in the middle of that series. Yeah. And Harden goes out and literally, was it the first quarter of Game 1 with that hamstring?
Minutes of Game 1. And then Nets went up 2-0 in that series, crushing the Bucks in Game 2. And they were seconds away from winning Game 3 and going up 3-0. So
Kyrie gets hurt in that Game 3. And people, it's like the Harden experience, recency bias, how we think about Harden is so skewed over the past few months and the last playoff series. But I had a James Harden MVP bet that I placed because I knew that Kyrie and KD would likely miss time, and he carried that team in that because they were the 2 seed in that season, and he for like a 20-30 game stretch was like one of the best players in the league. So it's easy to forget, like not that long ago, and it's kind of crazy now even talking about it how quickly the Nets have found themselves. Honestly, not in a terrible place considering the amount of talent that's walked out the door. But crazy to from the peaks to the valleys so quickly. So something we may have in common. Ben Simmons is a Brooklyn Net. He is also allegedly Australian. Yet to put on the Boomers jersey at any point. He's given a very interesting article with Mark Spears. I thought there was some good stuff. There was some classic Ben Simmons stuff in there. Where are you with Ben Simmons? Were you able to read that article from Mark Spears? Do you reckon he can turn it around? Where are you with Ben?
Yeah, so I'm not sure which side you two stand on Ben Simmons, but even after covering James Harden, Kyrie Irving, and Kevin Durant, Ben Simmons is the most polarizing player I've seen. Even when he was at his peak, even when he was playing his best with the Sixers, there were a lot of people that just hated his play style. They couldn't get around the fact that he wouldn't shoot three-pointers. I mean, he truly is the most polarizing player I've seen. Me, I'm a little bit more on the positive side. I lean back on the science of it. Doctors say that it takes 18 months to recover from the surgery that he had, full recovery in terms of the nerves regenerating in the back. And for anyone that's done anything in athletics, even weightlifting or anything, the back is the core strength of the body. So I think if you watch Ben Simmons last season, his rebounds and his assists were pretty much in line with his career totals. His points were way down. He was very hesitant at the rim, which is not far off from how he typically plays. He's always pass first, but he had no explosion at the rim whatsoever. So he would revert to finesse shots at the rim, hook shots. He had no explosion. So I think that really impacted his aggressiveness at the rim, and he knew he didn't have the physical ability to be who he really is. We didn't see any of those high flying dunks, any of that physicality at the rim, which he's known for. So I think that was purely health related. There might be other issues involved, mental issues people mentioned. So I'm not going to get into all that. I don't know the extent of all that. I just know from the player that he was in Philadelphia, he physically was not that player last season. And doctors and the Nets, they seem to think he's going to recover physically. So I'm optimistic from that extent. I'm not sure he gets back to his full all-star form from Philadelphia, but I do think he will be a positive player, a starting point guard for the Nets this season. And I think where they're at right now, that would be positive for this group. He'd be another 27-year-old player to fit with Mikal Bridges, Cam Johnson, Nick Claxton, fits the identity of defense and athleticism. And he gives them a point guard, which they truly needed last year. So I think he'll fit into things nicely this season, but I'm cautiously awaiting to see if he could truly get back to his prior form.
Yeah, I'm not even sure that the physical recovery is the most important thing. Like he will recover from that injury, but the mental recovery, and I want to be careful here because it's so speculative to sort of talk, and present oneself as knowingly talking about someone's mental health situation. But prior to the back injury, there's just so many examples of Ben Simmons shying away from opportunities to be in the spotlight. And as Aussies like Jake and I will tell you that, like, it's so frustrating watching him continually ditch opportunities to play with the Boomers, to the point where he's done like media availabilities posing in the Boomers uniform, hashtag can't wait to play on the Olympic team or the World Cup team, and then ultimately bailed, to the point where it's never surprising to see him shy away from an opportunity to shine as an Aussie. I wouldn't even say star anymore, just as an Aussie contributing player in the NBA. So yeah, he'll recover from his back surgery. I'd be curious to hear your thoughts on this, Billy. And again, we want to be careful not to speculate too heavily on anyone's mental health situation. But to me, that's the most concerning aspect of Ben Simmons at this juncture in his career.
And I think that's where probably most people differ when you talk about Ben Simmons. No one truly knows the extent of that. For me, I'm just leaning back on the player he was in Philadelphia. I think many of those mental issues persisted during that point, and he was still able to be a 3-time All-Star and highly productive player. So for me, it's about getting the body right first. I think that leads to confidence with the mind. And from there, that's the best you can hope for. The mental issues, they're very complicated. I'm not sure the extent of them, as I said. But I think first things first, get the body right. You'll feel more confident, and you'll see where it goes from there.
I actually do think that it's a great situation for Ben to get back to that point. There's not going to be championship expectations in Brooklyn anymore. With him being moved to Brooklyn from Philly, the expectations were championships at that point. Kyrie and KD were still there. And that's a tough place to be if you are having some issues mentally on the court, but also, like, as someone that's had a lot of back issues, I'm like on the mobility train every day. When that's not right, you can't play basketball, and you can't play basketball at a high level. You can't play basketball at the NBA level. Like, it's interesting to me that we didn't really get information about how severe these injuries were, and I'm going to take him at his word when it comes to the injury stuff, because I actually think it kind of makes sense. Like, even with Philly, right? Like, there was, the unwillingness to shoot and some, the famous Trae Young play. But as you said, especially in the regular season, he was a Defensive Player of the Year candidate. He was All NBA. He was like a force. He was like a force.
3-time All-Star, yeah.
Force in the regular season, like absolutely no question. And so I'm hopeful for him because I don't want to see anyone just like not be able to play basketball again from back issues. And I'm like, from what he said, he tried to play through that stuff because he could hear a lot of the media stuff. I wonder, could that his PR team is just they got to hire some new people because like everybody's speculating about this stuff and maybe he doesn't care, but if you were able to get some of this information out about this back stuff, I personally would have been far more understanding of where he's at as opposed to him going out there every night and looking like a shell of himself, which now reading that makes a lot of sense to me.
Yeah, I think he was in the worst possible situation for someone coming back from the type of surgery that he had. If you think about the circumstances around the Nets at that time, KD asked for a trade last summer. The entire summer last summer, that was what it was about for the Nets. Finally, Joe Tsai, the owner, and Sean Marks, the general manager, they convinced Kevin Durant to come back. Part of that was a belief that they can contend for a championship. That belief partly rested on Ben Simmons being an all-star. So there was pressure from the start of the season on Ben Simmons to be an all-star, Steve Nash to lead this team to a championship, Kyrie to be around and playing for a contract. And because he in the summer, remember, he had to opt in because he couldn't get a longer-term deal with the Nets or someone else. So there was all this pressure with the Nets. It was still a difficult situation with Kevin Durant, even though he came back. So there was so much pressure on Ben Simmons to be that player for the Nets that one, he himself was coming off the fiasco that he had in Philly over a year ago, where he had the last memory of everyone seeing him was missing, not taking that layup against Trae Young. So he felt he had something to prove. Then you had KD desperately wanting to win, where the Nets felt any moment he could ask out. And Kyrie's situation's always hovering over. So there was pressure for Ben Simmons to play immediately and for this team to contend and to start fast without Kevin Durant having to ask out. And when this team started poorly, fired Steve Nash very quickly, you saw the tensions rising. They somehow turned it around right after Kyrie Irving had that suspension for the anti-Semitic comments or whatever, or the posting, I should say. They somehow turned it around, and Ben Simmons was a part of that. So I just don't think it was a situation where there was much patience for Ben Simmons to get back to his form or much tolerance for him to even talk about his injury. So this season, as you mentioned, I think it's a much better atmosphere for him to kind of get back to himself, play with a group of players around his similar age, where development is kind of the key here. Mikal Bridges is a great guy, great team player. He's going to keep the vibe in that locker room loose. They're all similar age, similar interests. So I think it's definitely a better fit for Ben Simmons, and one hopefully where he can find his prior form. Yeah,
and look, as a human, but like as an Australian in particular, like it would be nice to see, like I want to see players play to their potential. And even if we never, I don't know if Ben Simmons turning into a shooter is ever going to be a thing, but getting Ben Simmons back to, and I just don't mention the shooting in the article. Just don't mention the shooting that you're taking, because anyway, I want to see him get back to that. He's a fun player, especially in the regular season. Like he's a fun, very unique player. And I think he would make that Nets team really fun if he can get back to that level. We do now quickly have to hear a quick word from our sponsor. Be back in a second.
New FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get $200 in bonus bets, guaranteed. Plus, all customers who bet $5 will get $100 off NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV.
Billy, are you an NFL guy at all?
Definitely. Can't wait.
Are you a responsible gambler at all? Do you have any tips for the people in the chat here?
Listen, I've dabbled. I wouldn't give any tips. Okay. I don't know what you want to trust.
Very safe.
Smart man. I've been handing out some things every episode. I'm on Josh Reynolds over, I believe it's 23.5 receiving yards for the Lions. It's NFL starts tomorrow, team. Very exciting. So that's my pick. The Chiefs defense, no Chris Jones, bit of a mess. We won't get too in the weeds, but that's my pick. Josh Reynolds over 23.5 receiving yards. That's just one play, action play. Deep shot. No worries.
I know nothing about the NFL, so I will happily move us on. So, Billy, in your opinion, is there any existing rivalry, even as a leftover of the last two iterations of the teams, between the Celtics and the Brooklyn Nets?
I think for Nets fans, maybe aside from the Knicks, just because of the proximity and that Nets fans have friends that are Knicks fans and vice versa, I think the Sixers and the Celtics are probably the two closest rivals, and that kind of has to do with the trades that have happened between those two teams in recent years. I think there's also there's a lot of Nets fans that are Yankee fans, and then there's Celtics fans that are Red Sox fans. So I think there's always a little Boston, New York hatred there.
Sure.
Between the Nets and the Celtics, I've wanted this to become a real rivalry for years. Go back to the Garnett Pierce trade. Even before that, I remember a scrum over a decade ago, Rondo and Chris Humphries going to the stands when KG and Pierce were still at the Celtics. I mean, there've been some good teams that have overlapped over the years that there could have really been a rivalry. Obviously, in the past few years when the Nets had KD, Kyrie, and Harden, the Celtics, if they kept that come up at the same time while the Nets kept that team together, that could have really been a special rivalry. Right now, I don't know if the Nets are on the level of the Celtics. I think that there could be some fun matchups, though. Obviously, the Nets had that big comeback against the Celtics in Boston last season, right after they made the trades, Mikal Bridges and Cam Johnson leading that comeback. But I think there will always be a little Boston-New York rivalry. But I think the Nets have to get a little bit better to be on that level with Boston right now.
I mean, I think there's definitely a Nets-Celtics rivalry. I think, obviously, the context of this upcoming season, there might not be as much juice. That being said, the Nets handed the Celtics like one of their worst losses of the season last year, where they were up like 30 points in the first half, and the Nets came all the way back and won in, unfortunately, very classic Celtics fashion, one of their signature blown huge leads. The Nets had their number on that one, but the Celtics fans have a special place a lot of Celtics fans, I should say, have a special place in their heart for Kyrie Irving. Not a good place. So, when I was there in the first round matchup 2022, where KD, Kyrie, that first round, that 2-7 matchup, I was in the Garden game 2, my first ever Celtics game. And a lot of Celtics fans don't like Kyrie. And I like it's So there's definitely that element. I will be interesting to see. Like that kind of feels like the only thing really that was keeping it going, like last season in particular. So I do think that the Nets are going to have to get a little better to keep that rivalry going. But it's a great point for like the KG trade. I'm excited to actually go back and look up that little Chris Humphries Rondo scrap now.
Oh yeah, that was a good one.
So. It's funny, like the playoffs are awesome for a variety of reasons, but one that I like it for is when, being a content creator, being online, you find people that create content from other teams, especially in the playoffs, because you're scouting. You're scouting who are the Twitter bosses on the other side here. And Billy, I got that. This is how I found you, was during that in the lead up to that series, and I think that was a time like a lot of people picked the Nets to win that series, and there are a lot of Celtics fans that were very upset that was our 2-7 matchup. Because I do think
that was one of the closest four-game sweeps we've seen.
Totally.
I think the total margin of victory was 17 or 18 points. Obviously, Jason Tatum had the game winner twirling layup in game one, and every game was close from there. Nick Claxton, I think, went like 2 of 21 from free throw line in the series, so that's the margin right there. But that season just fell off for the Nets ever since the Harden trade happened. It was too rushed. Simmons obviously wasn't there. Joe Harris was hurt, but that was a fun series. It was a close series. Yeah,
it's fun now for Celtics fans to say we swept them, because objectively that's true. But man, it was
terrifying. It was terrifying going in.
Oh,
I thought it was going to go 7 games at least, and I really had no idea who was going to come out victorious.
And, that's right. Well, I mean, the series can change on a dime. I mean, if Jason Tatum doesn't score that at the buzzer, up 1-0, and then they just have to split each way going back, and momentum changes. So who knows? It could have been a long series, but it was definitely a good one. I was hoping for the rubber match this year because the Nets had but 1-5 the year prior, gentleman sweep, and then the Celtics swept last year. So I thought they were on a little bit of a collision course this year, but Kyrie had other plans. So
he often does, unfortunately. I mean, has there been a point in your Celtics fandom or Nets fandom where would you say you've hated the Celtics the most? Would it have been in that that little pressure cooker of time. Was anything else come to mind?
I've never really found, I guess, this iteration of the Celtics with Tatum and Brown hateable. I think more when they had that big three back in the day with KG, because KG was all about this. I loved KG.
Oh, yeah.
KG's one of my favorite players of all time. He's like my exact type of player, ultra competitor. But back when they had that, he wanted to talk trash the whole time.
Oh, yeah.
He was very hateable. That team was hateable. They put that big three together, kind of similar to, I guess, to the Nets, where you see a team come unorganically in a way together. It's easy to hate that. Tatum and Brown, obviously, they're former Nets draft picks, so that was always an interesting connection there. But they seem to, I always liked them even back in college and everything. So, and Marcus Smart was likable. So it wasn't a team that ever I found hateable. Al Horford's a respected veteran. So I don't know. We never really got to the point of a real heated rivalry between the Nets and the Celtics. It was more Celtics fans against Kyrie. That was the extent of it. It was never really beyond that, but I wish we got that.
Man, you definitely endeared yourself to the first floor fans with that one, Marcus.
Maybe a few of them could unblock me, maybe from those.
There we go.
Definitely
start
unblock
the
Billy.
campaign. Yeah,
good guy. Come on.
That's really refreshing to hear, Billy, because Celtics podcast, we get a lot of opposing fan bases, media folks on, and usually media people will do away with their fandom in order to remain professional. We find that's pretty consistent across most media people, and yet the hate for the Celtics seems to drip through still and be a commonality between all opposing media folks. So that's really refreshing. I hope that people unblock you as a result of that take. I do have to respond and say that my hatred for the Nets, and Jake, let's get your thoughts on this too, peaked when the rumors of Kyrie Irving leaving the Celtics started to reach a boiling point, and there was that clip of he and Kevin Durant at the All-Star game, and Kyrie Irving appeared to be saying 2 max slots on camera there in the hallway, and then just the Nets fans piling on, just being like, he's ours now, and us kind of being like, well, that may not necessarily be a good thing. But it was at that time before they realized that like Kyrie is kind of a detriment to your franchise. That was my peak of hatred for the Nets there, and since then it's more, I won't say pity. There's almost a camaraderie in that we've kind of both been through this Kyrie thing together, and we've come out of it better for it. Really, we're both better. Even though talent-wise, maybe the Nets aren't better after the fact, I think they're a better vibes team, and they're more fun to root for. Is my take on the Nets there. So, what do you think, Jake?
Man, it definitely peaked for me as soon as Kyrie left. That's when it was, because I'm a trustworthy guy. When I hear someone say, if you'll have me, I'll stay. When I see him put the video with the commercial with his dad talking about getting his jersey retired, I'm all in. Also, Billy, I'm sure you are also aware, when Kyrie's playing basketball, it's mesmerizing. When he's collecting wins for your basketball team, it's mesmerizing. When that first season started, Hayward snaps his leg in half 5 minutes into the season. And anyway, just had PTSD flashback for a moment. That the Celtics go on this 16-game winning streak orchestrated by Kyrie Irving. He gets injured later in the year and they go on that Eastern Conference Finals run. And then they come into the next season kind of loaded. But that first Kyrie Irving season, I was like, this is it. We've got the guy. We've hit on Jason Tatum. He looks like a future superstar already in his rookie year. And so I was seeing titles and banners in the sky. And so for him to rip that away from me and lied to me hurt. So that's where it peaked for me.
Is there any part of you guys, though? I wonder this, because obviously the Celtics have gone on a positive trajectory since Kyrie left. I think a lot of that is due to the natural progression of Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown. Obviously, people want to point at Kyrie's gone, the cancer's gone, all of that. I think it's more Tatum and Brown. Yes. Udoka came in, he kind of got things going. So is there any part of you that would have liked to see the Kyrie experiment go longer, given the progression of Tatum and Brown? Because the Celtics haven't won a title at this point now, right? Mm-hmm. And windows are short in the NBA. Even as young as Tatum and Brown are, Brown has signed an extension. You never know how long these players are here for. Is there part of you that would have liked to see? I'll turn the tables on you here. Is there part of you that would have liked to see Kyrie stay another year or two?
Yeah, Billy, I think about this all the time through the lens of if I could go back and change anything, would I? And I think as painful as some of those Kyrie and Gordon Hayward moments were, I think no. because where we are right now, and we talked about how fun it is to root for a good vibes team, where we are with the Jays and their role as leaders in the team, especially now with Marcus Smart being shipped out, I just don't know if there was any other pathway to get to that point. And if Kyrie Irving had been healthy and gelled well with the team, and if Gordon Hayward had been healthy and gelled well with the team, you've got to imagine that Tatum and Brown would have been young pieces, shipped out potentially to find more established veterans to pair with a healthy and happy Kyrie Irving and Gordon Hayward. And looking back now on that as a possibility is almost traumatizing, which is weird to say about something that didn't happen, but that's where I stand on it. So I kind of, as painful as part of the journey was, I wouldn't change anything because I'm so stoked with where we are now.
Fair enough. I might have to come back to you on that if the Celtics don't win a title over the next one.
Yes. Fitting.
You are correct, Billy. The Celtics have not won a title, and me
Thank
and
you
Ben
for
are
reminding us.
going to die 5 years or 10 years earlier than we should have because of the amount of Game 7 series we've played across the last 2 years. And look, yesterday we were doing a Celtics and chill thing, and I was entertaining the idea of 40-year-old LeBron coming in, and the chat was not happy with me. I'm drawn to sirens. My self-control is something that I'm working on in my day-to-day life. So I would definitely be tempted. I think in a vacuum, if it's like, if you can promise me happy and healthy Kyrie, then sure.
I can't promise you that. It's always a risk.
That's the
It's
problem.
always I think you agree with me though, Jake. I am of the belief that get as much talent as you can and it will work itself out. I was all for the James Harden trade. I think every GM in the league would tell you they would have put this big three for the Nets together and made the Harden trade. And if they tell you that they wouldn't, they're lying. Like, this is what the NBA is about. It's about amassing these stars, putting them together, and then taking the risk there. So, I don't know. I think get all the stars together and you see what happens. They're too talented to not work, in my opinion.
I do think with Kyrie in particular now, I'm not sure I put him in, if you go back, if you give me the 2018, Tatum was drafted in that 17 draft, that 17-18 season. If you can give me the 17-18 version of Kyrie, the problem is that was 5 years ago, and he has had shoulder, knee, and the culture piece, chemistry thing is definitely real. Like, if I agree with you, talent is always the move where possible, but at the same time, I don't put Kyrie in this top echelon of talent anymore. And so right now, I think that's fair. I think we're going to see it with Dallas as well, because he's now 30 years old. 31 maybe, and I do think chemistry and fit is important, especially on this Celtics team. But it's a good question. It's a good question nonetheless.
Yeah, and speaking of the Celtics team, and before we move on and to wrap up with some net stuff, I've got to ask Billy, thoughts on the Celtics offseason this year. One of the most enjoyable parts of this series that we're doing this offseason, this Eastern Conference Rival Series, is getting opposing reporters' takes on the Celtics offseason. So the Porzingis trade, shipping out Marcus Smart, bringing in a high injury risk but high talent in Kristaps Porzingis, and some of the smaller moves on the side. What's your take on the Celtics offseason, and so where do you see them in contendership coming into this coming season?
Well, I'm disappointed they didn't bring my guy Blake Griffin back. I mean, one of the most likable, right? I mean, I've never seen a star transition into a more likable role player than Blake Griffin.
On.
Totally.
I mean, especially that first year with the Nets, he was very good. But that's a joke. They're filling out the rest of the roster. We'll see. But
no, we take that very seriously.
No. We literally wish that he was taking the 15th roster spot. He is an elite vibesman. And
I think he's a perfect last big on your bench. He can get in there. But we'll get to the bigger thing. So Porzingis, being in New York, got to see Porzingis a lot.
Sure.
First he was with the Knicks. I've always loved his talent. I think if you think about the league, it's such a rare archetype to have a true floor spacing big that could also protect the rim. Like a true floor spacer. There's guys that will shoot threes, but they're not really guarded. They're not shooting a high volume. Porzingis gets really guarded at the three-point line, and he can protect the rim. So he could play with Robert Williams. He could play with Al Horford. He could play alone if they go with Tatum at the 4. So he gives them a lot more versatility. And I think if the Celtics aren't bringing in a true floor general point guard to kind of help Tatum and Brown with their efficiency and playing them off the ball more, I think the key is to have spacing bigs. And we've seen that over the years with Al Horford and Grant Williams. Having Porzingis allows Tatum and Brown to play more one-on-one, more isolation, get to the rack. So I like the Porzingis move from that talent standpoint. The question with him is always health. You can't really predict that. You just got to hope he's healthy come playoff time. But they have enough front court depth that if he does miss some games during the regular season, I think they'll be okay. The part with Marcus Smart is tough because I think from a pure talent standpoint, and if you're looking at the team on a spreadsheet, the team got better. I think Marcus Smart brings intangible value that you can't quantify. I think he's one of the rare role players in the NBA that can challenge stars. That's super rare because he came into the league before Tatum and Brown. He was there when they were rookies. He can challenge them. He can hold them accountable. And I just saw in Brooklyn with KD and Kyrie, it's very hard to have role players that are respected by stars and can hold them accountable. And obviously those are different personalities, but Tatum and Brown are still star players at this point. So I think they're going to miss Marcus Smart's on-court leadership. When I look at that team, who's the leader? It's Al Horford. Who else do they have? I'm not so sure. I think Tatum and Brown are going to have to take a little bit more of a leadership position now that they're getting into their late 20s. So I think that's going to be something they have to figure out throughout the season, especially with that Ime Udoka, as he's a big voice in that locker room. Is Joe Mazzulla ready to kind of command the locker room in that way without a Marcus Smart? So I think that's going to be a challenge throughout the season. Marcus Smart's also a role player who he might not be the most efficient shooter and he might be inconsistent, but he'll come up in a game 6 and give you 22 points and 5 of 7 from 3. And there's not a lot of role players that have the variance to kind of keep shooting and really explode for games like that in the playoffs, which I think is valuable. So there are questions about Malcolm Brogdon's injuries now. So they might be a little thin in the backcourt. So it's going to be interesting because they've been so used to playing with Marcus Smart for years now that it's going to be interesting to see how things go forward. I know they would have loved to have done that trade with Malcolm Brogdon. That would have been the answer. But I think the Porzingis move was necessary in the extent that Al Horford's aging, and the Celtics, the way they've played and the way they have played over the years, and Brad Stevens has seemed to like it as a coach and now a front office executive. They love to have a spacing big man that could also defend. So I think Porzingis is kind of replacing what Horford might lose with age. Like I said, he could play with Robert Williams. They could stay big. They can go small. He could play with Horford. So there's a lot of versatility in that way. Celtics might lose a little bit of perimeter defense with no Marcus Smart, but I think Porzingis' rim protection will help them in that regard. But for the Celtics, I'd be mostly worried about the intangibles of the toughness, the grit, and everything else that Marcus Smart brings.
Wow. Look, I think judging someone's ball-knowing content, acumen, I think asking them about Marcus Smart is a great way to do that. And Billy, you have passed with flying colors. I think.
Appreciate it. Don't make me blush.
And that's our biggest concern. Like, I think to your point about talent, more talented roster. Like Porzingis, as much as we love Marcus Smart, Porzingis is like a borderline all-star, has been an all-star, has like a real ceiling as a player, and you can see how it fits together. We absolutely have been asking those same questions. The heart and soul has left. Tatum and Brown need to step up, and Brad Stevens has kind of hinted at that being the case, and it's like it's time. You know, Marcus Smart, as great as bringing all those intangibles to the court and to the locker room are, it kind of meant that Jason and Jalen didn't have to bring as much of that to the team. And so now with them going out, I'm sure, this is a big, like, leadership's probably maybe the most important thing for both of these guys coming into this season with Marcus Smart leaving. So obviously the health stuff, but yeah, I think the intangible stuff, Tatum and Jalen, 25, 26 years old now, still young-ish, but it's time to take the reins.
No, I know from a Nets perspective, Nets fans looking at the Celtics in recent years, and when the Nets were trying to catch the Celtics after the Celtics kind of lapped them a little bit, the problem was always the Nets don't have this extra grit. They don't have these intangibles. The Celtics have this defensive identity, this kind of like in-your-face alpha dog mentality. And a lot of that was led by Marcus Smart. So I'm not sure when teams look at the other side to the Celtics now, there's anyone, not that they fear, this is basketball, professional sports. It's not combat sports. But someone that kind of has that alpha dog mentality on the Celtics, I'm not sure that they have that same presence anymore. So it's going to be something they're going to have to work on. They're going to have a conscious effort every night to come with that physicality more so than they did before. But I think the talent will be something where they can overcome that, and they're still going to be among the leading contenders, if not the leading contender in the Eastern Conference. I
was going to say, if I had to nail you down, do you have the Celtics at the top? Do you have the Bucks at the top? Do you believe in devil magic that the Heat will do this again? Maybe you believe in the Damian Lillard trade.
Yeah, I mean, the variables of Damian Lillard trade, right? The Heat have kind of had the Celtics number a little bit over recent years, at least compared to the talent they've had, comparing it with Boston. So I think if Lillard goes to Boston, if Lillard goes to Miami, that might make me lean Miami. I think I would take the Celtics over the Bucks just because I have questions about Middleton's injuries and aging and Drew Holiday's injuries and aging and Brook Lopez. So I think that roster is getting a little bit old fast. There's a big load on Giannis, and I'm not sure they've done enough around him to keep going. But Miami with Lillard, that will be a tough team if they can get him.
Yeah, every night I'm lighting the candles to make sure that one doesn't happen. That's
So is Jason Tatum. I heard he reached out to Damian Lillard.
Yeah.
Yes, he did. Thankfully, Windhorse and Zach Lowe have kind of indicated that there's nothing on the horizon and training camp is coming up. So every day we get closer to training camp is, if we can just get that Damian Lillard trade to happen at the trade deadline as opposed to at the beginning of the season, that will be a win because there's pretty much never been a team that has made a trade at the deadline for a superstar and won a title outside of, I want to say, Clyde Drexler on the Rockets, and the Rockets won the title the year previous. So that's very different and very, very long time ago. All right, closing up with some Nets questions as well. So what is the road map for the Nets? Obviously, the Nets don't own their own picks, I don't think, until 2027, maybe even longer. But they own Phoenix, Philly, Houston picks. I was having a look, like 2027, they're loaded with picks.
Yep.
So there's obviously no reason to tank because they don't have their own picks. So what's kind of the roadmap going forward here?
Yeah, I think the Nets believe in their ability to attract all-star talent, and they've shown that in recent years over and over again. So I think they believe in the market of New York City, people wanting to play there. They think they have a nice young core right now. They have the flexibility both in terms of player assets and picks to be a player for any star that comes available. We even saw Damian Lillard this year. I mean, he mentioned the Nets and the Heat. He narrowed it down to the Heat, but he mentioned the Nets as another team that made sense. So already just months after they traded KD and Kyrie, there's another star thinking about Brooklyn. So I think the next cycle of stars, if the Nets are competitive enough this year and stay around that 500 mark and Bridges continues to look good and Claxton takes a step, he's a free agent next summer, we'll see if they keep him. But if their young pieces on that roster continue to mold and they look attractive, I think that next wave of stars, whether it's Donovan Mitchell, who is from New York, or it could be Embiid next summer. I'm not sure how I feel about him with the Nets, but guys of that nature, I think they're going to be a player for any star that comes available in the next few years if they can stay competitive. So I think that's the Nets' plan as of now. Just continue to churn away at this thing this next year, get the young guys getting better, get some kind of stabilize the situation with the roster. Obviously, they had the trades at the deadline last year, but give them a little bit more of a runway with the training camp this year. Hopefully, they're competitive, and then see what happens. Stars move around a lot in the NBA. If you look at 5 years ago, some of the best players in the league, some of them have switched not only once but twice in terms of switching teams. So there's going to be guys that move over the next couple of years. The Nets are going to be players for them.
Yeah, it's really impressive how the Nets have positioned themselves so quickly post Durant and Kyrie to be at that jumping off point where they've got a nice foundation of young, on the precipice of stardom players like Mikal Bridges and assets to trade potentially for a star that does shake loose or become available as well. I'll also say, so first of all, the Nets so lucky to be one of those few franchises that are like a legitimately desirable destination for free agents. In Boston, we do not know what that feels like. Although we have had some decent
they're a second-tier destination. They're not you could be worse than Boston.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah,
yes.
Yeah, and it's based on the culture here in Boston, which does waver. We obviously saw that in the Rick Pitino years. We saw that briefly with Kyrie Irving. The culture's on the uptick now, so things are feeling better in that regard. And then I'll say, and I don't know how much this means to the players, but I've been to a lot of NBA arenas in my time, and the Barclays Center is probably the best NBA arena that I've ever been to, just as far as, like, there's not a bad seat in the house. The food is amazing, obviously. Again, that doesn't benefit the players. But suffice to say, it's a great franchise built on good foundations that has recovered quickly from the detriments brought to them by KD and Kyrie. I'm very impressed by how quickly they've repositioned themselves to be on that jumping off point and elevating themselves to where they are now to potential championship contention. So
and listen,
really
Sean Marks in this front office did it last time with no picks, and they got KD, Kyrie, and eventually James Harden. So they have a ton more assets, both in terms of the roster and picks, to do it this time. So they have a good shot to put themselves in contention in years to come, but might take a little bit of a step back this season. Patience and make sure this time they get the right stars, because I think you don't just want to get stars. What we learned over the last couple of years, you want to get the right stars. So A guy like Embiid that might be approaching 30 with injuries. I hinted at that. That's someone you'd have to think twice about. Whereas Donovan Mitchell, a little bit younger from New York, I could see that as being a better fit.
Donovan Mitchell and Mikal Bridges would be very fun.
Spicy.
I will say I was so I went to game 2 in Boston for that Nets series. Then I went to game 3 in Brooklyn of the Nets series, and I was in the very, very last row for that second game. Paid for good tickets for the Boston game. Enemy territory. I wanted, and also they were crazy expensive for.
Don't want to be
Brooklyn.
seen.
Yeah. But great seats. It was still a really great view. So you're right on that, Ben. Question just about, I guess, the roster. Who's gonna start? Is Simmons going to start? Let's assume that he's healthy, right? So it's Claxton, McHale, Cam Johnson. Is it Finney-Smith? And then is it Dinwiddie? Is Dinwiddie going to start again? Or is Simmons going to start? That's going to be interesting to me because I think Simmons would expect to be starting, right?
Yeah, all indications from Simmons' camp and he said from speaking with Jock Vaughn and from speaking with the Nets front office that they expect Ben Simmons to be the starting point guard this season. Okay. And they understand he's best as a point guard. So I think Simmons, Bridges, Cam Johnson, and Claxton, those are the 4 kind of likely starters. I think that fits spot they're going to play around with in training camp. Do they need another ball handler like Spencer Dinwiddie? Do they want another 3-and-D guy that's a little bit of a better shooter in Royce O'Neal? Do they want to go really big with Dorian Finney-Smith? I think that's something they'll play with throughout the year. Cam Thomas, maybe by the end of the year, could he carve out a starting spot? He showed some great flashes last year, maybe with a little bit more of a runway this year, getting a year older. He can be someone that fits into that closing 5 at least by the end of the season. So I think there's a lot of moving parts with the Nets. I think they'll play around with it. To start the season, I think it will probably be Simmons, Dinwiddie, Bridges, Johnson, Claxton. I think it helps to have Dinwiddie as another half-court creator next to Simmons. Gives them another spacer and ball handler to kind of combat the non-spacing of Claxton and Simmons together. But I think they'll play around with it. Matchups might dictate. So we'll see. They have a lot of depth. Because of liquidating 3 stars, They do have a lot of depth, especially in the front court. So I think they'll play around with different lineups.
What do you think the expectations are? Where do you kind of see the Nets finishing? I know we got someone in the chat saying we think 6th they could finish. We've got someone thinking 9th or 10th. What do you think Viom thinks 6th. We got Michelle Douglas thinking 9th or 10th. Where do you think expectations are? And then maybe where do you think that they'll finish up? Because that kind of group after Milwaukee and Boston and Miami, even Miami was obviously the 7th or 8th seed last year, but that next group, there's so many Pacers, Bulls, Hawks, there's so many teams, Brooklyn, that I think fall into that next group. Where do you think the Nets end up finishing?
Yeah, I think their range is probably the 6th to the 10th seed. I think the goal is to be over 500. I think the goal is to make the playoffs. So last year when they got Mikal Bridges, I don't know the exact record offhand. It might have been 13-15, and they did have some load management days. So they were right around 500, and this team had no training camp. They threw an entirely new starting lineup together. Nearly everyone besides Nick Claxton was traded for. So I think with a training camp, hopefully a healthier Ben Simmons, some version of Ben Simmons that they didn't get last year, and then development of all these young players on the roster. Spencer Dinwiddie said the other day he's been working out with Nick Claxton all summer. He thinks he's poised for another big leap. So we'll see. Cam Thomas is a guy who can improve, and then Simmons, as I mentioned. I think those are the X factors, those 3 guys, based on how they leap and for how they could be this season. But my expectation is somewhere around 500, 40 to 42 wins. And being competitive, pesky team that shows some promise, the young players start to get a little better, and you get a little more clarity, not only about your own team, but the landscape of the league going forward and what stars might become available over the next few years.
I do think, honestly, there is a world where they finish a little higher. I think there's a pretty wide range of outcomes for the Nets, but I do see a world. You didn't mention Dennis Smith Jr., who I think is he's completely reinvented himself as this elite guard defender. And so all of a sudden it's okay, if Simmons is healthy and he's a depoy, he's an all defense guy again, and it's Dennis Smith Jr., Simmons, Claxton, elite rim protector, Finney-Smith, Bridges,
Cam Johnson. They got defenders up and down.
I was gonna say they could have one of they could. I think there's a world, if everything goes right, where they have a top 5 defense, and then the offense just has to be good enough where I think in an East where you have question. I didn't mention the Cavs. They're probably the other team where I think safely they're going to be, and the Knicks safely in that in the next tier. So I think I don't think home court, maybe the 5th seed, is out of the realm of possibilities. I think this defense on a night-to-night basis is going to be a pain in the ass to play against, because I think you've got guys that like to play in the regular season. Like, as you said, Bridges, he's going to be there every night causing trouble. Dennis Smith, he's got a chip on his shoulder. In theory.
Yeah, no, I think they have a relatively high floor, not high floor, but I don't think they're going to be a team that bottoms out completely uncompetitive into lottery, just because they have a young group that's going to be fairly durable. They're going to compete defensively every night. Nearly all the guys have a chip on their shoulder or something to play for, whether it's contract related or something else. So it's a group of high character guys. There's not a lot of egos in there. So I think it will be a group that's competitive, fun to watch. Their pathway to success, as you mentioned, is being a top 10 defense, maybe a top 5, top 3 defense even. And then playing up tempo, playing fast, getting out in transition, using their athleticism, Simmons in the open court, and then doing enough in the half court. Bridges is a good 3-level scorer. Cam Johnson, I think, has some room to grow as a creator on the ball. Cam Thomas taking a step forward. So they have some pieces. So I think it'll be fun to watch them this year. It's one of the first times in a while where the Nets don't really have high expectations, and you can kind of just watch game in and game out for development and see how a good group of guys mesh.
I think they'll stress a lot of teams out as well. Like, one of the fun things about following what is currently a top tier team with the Celtics is like going into a game, just like rubbing your hands together. Yes, like this is going to be so much fun. We're going to destroy this team. And I don't feel that way about this iteration of the Nets just because of their size. Basically everything you guys have already discussed, that there's so few weak points, so few exploits with their defense. Even with Spencer Dinwiddie out there, who's kind of an underwhelming player, particularly on offense, he does have a lot of size at the point guard position. So there's so few points of attack going up against a team like the Nets. It will be interesting to see how that changes with the Celtics, with Porzingis and how he can attack zone defenses and things like that. But ultimately, like, it's a stressful matchup for Celtics fans because there's no easy buckets. So
they're matchups. They're built very similar to the Raptors in recent years, where they have a lot of defenders. They got to figure out the offensive side of the ball, but the length with Simmons at 6'10" at the point, and Bridges being super long with over a 7-foot wingspan. Claxton, one of the league's leading shot blockers last year. Johnson's long, and wings galore. So the two smallest guys that are going to be in the rotation is Dennis Smith, who's pretty stout, and Cam Thomas, who's relatively stout. So they're going to have a good rotation of defenders, and we'll see how it all meshes.
I love Cam Thomas. I mean, and I was going to say, I meant to say Cameron Johnson, 2 Cams. That's going to be confusing. Cam Thomas, man, never seen a shot he doesn't like. But Cam Johnson, one of the most solid wings in the league. Like, I really, really like him. The foundation for the Nets is solid. I'm excited to see them next year. Billy, this has been awesome. For everybody in the chat, please go follow Billy Reinardt. It's just at Billy Reinardt, I believe, on Twitter. Is that right?
Yes. Yeah, correct.
Yeah, go follow Billy on Twitter. He's doing a bunch of different social media content online, and he's just a great follow. And I like to have my media from all the other different teams, so I'm getting a good view of the league. And Billy does as good a job as anybody, and you can tell he knows ball. He appreciates Marcus Smart, so you know what he's talking about. Ben, unless you got anything else here, I think we might get out of here.
I think that's it. I think just bring on the season already, right? Like,
please.
It's the longest off season ever from memory.
Oh, when you guys reached out to me to do a podcast early September, I'm dying to talk NBA right now.
Yeah.
It's the longest offseason of all time.
I know. It's brutal.
God, we're getting there day by day. Thank the Lords that the NFL is starting tomorrow. So that'll tide me over for a month or so. Everybody in the chat, I appreciate you guys stopping by again today. And in the meantime, go Celtics.